Okay, I would like to welcome everybody to today's webinar, Gender Lens Investing, a Value Driver for Businesses. Thank you everybody who joined today. And first of all, happy International Women's Day. We have women and men on this call, of course. But I would like to celebrate in this moment the women who are here and the men who are supporting those women and the initiatives. We will meet some in this hour, for example, Martin and Tim, but more about that later. I would like to first give you a little context what we will be speaking about today. And then we will start with our keynote and our panelists. If you have questions during the webinar, please don't hesitate to put them, to ask your questions down in the Q&A box at the right-hand side of your screen. Obviously, we will have a Q&A section during this hour, but if you would like to post your question already now, please do so in this section below. So as we have people from within the finance industry and outside of the finance industry, hello, Jessica. Let's give a little context what we'll be talking today. So on this International Women's Day, people often speak about how can we support women and why investing in women is a feel-good activity. But it's not only a feel-good activity, it's actually a strong business case. And it brings us greater returns. So closing the global gap in the women's access to financial products and services could even unlock $330 billion in annual revenues. This is a large sum that most of people are not aware of, in particular outside of the finance industry. And in addition to the feel-good activity and the additional revenues, obviously diverse companies perform 25% better than homogeneous peers. This is a known figure supported by many institutions. So this Building Bridges webinar in collaboration with 2X and Gender Lens Initiative for Switzerland, which I will introduce later on, will provide today tangible examples of how gender lens investing strategies can be applied in public and private markets, as well as wealth management. So one more time, welcome to everybody who joined now. And I would like to now quickly just highlight once more our collaboration of companies. So for those who are from outside of Switzerland and have not heard yet about Building Bridges, Building Bridges is a Swiss-based and in Switzerland initiative, which aims to accelerate the transition into sustainable financial system. And it gives a platform for decision makers, experts, financial actors, to foster a transition into sustainable financial system. Then we have the Gender Lens Initiative for Switzerland, which is headed by Tim Raji, who will also speak later a little bit. The GLS aims to enhance Switzerland's contribution to SDG 5 and obviously mobilize more capital into that direction for gender lens investing, focusing on Swiss-based institutions. And finally, 2X, we will have a keynote by Jessica in a few minutes, which is a global network of investors as well as intermediaries, capital providers who are in public and private markets across both developed and emerging economies. Having said that, I would like to also remind you to remember the application deadline of March 31st for your contribution for the Building Bridges Action Days. So this is a call for action for everybody who would like to participate at the Building Bridges event, considering to host a panel. Please contact the organizers. Application deadline is March 31st. Okay, moving on to the speakers. We have a really high caliber panel today. Already mentioned before, we have Jessica Espinosa, who is the CEO of 2X Global. She will give us a keynote. Then we have also Audrey Kaplan, who is a senior portfolio manager at Global Equity of Robeco. Then we have Raya Papp, who is a founding partner at Sanjana. And finally, we have Martin Heimes. He's head of private debt at Ross Responsibility. With further ado, I would like to pass on to Jessica, who will give us the keynote and give us a quick overview what 2X is about and why there is a growing business case for gender lens investing and all the important developments around it. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you so much, and happy International Women's Day. It's really great to see you all. Yeah, 2X Global, we just heard it, but to share a little bit more background is the coming together of the 2X Collaborative that was born out of the 2X Challenge that many of you might be familiar with, and Gender Smart. And together we started into the new year as one united organization under the brand 2X Global. So the 2X initiative started at the G7 Summit in 2018, initially with our 2X Challenge. And that was a collective commitment by originally the development finance institutions of the G7 Summit, of the G7 countries, who came together and said, we know that there's a strong business case, a strong investment case for gender equality, and we know that there's a strong impact case. So how can we look at the data, look at our core business, and make a collective commitment to shift more capital into the hands of women and gender smart business? And we came out with this collective commitment of $3 billion that we wanted to allocate collectively under our core business, so across all customer clusters, all sectors, all geographies, and do so within a time frame of less than 3 years, so until the end of 2020. We ultimately looked at the evidence base. So we looked at the whole business value chain and the investment cycle, and came up with the 2X criteria as our investment framework of what good looks like and what we want to achieve. And I'm sure you've seen the criteria, but just to briefly recap, we look at entrepreneurship, so companies founded and owned by women, at leadership, companies led by women, so representation of women among senior management and on the board of directors. Then we look at employment, so quality employment, where are women in the workforce, but also what are policies and practices that promote gender equality in the workplace. And then products and services and how they are designed with a gender lens and who they ultimately serve, so who the target market is and how we can better serve the women's market. And then the fifth criterion looks at when we as institutional investors invest or lend to financial intermediaries such as funds or financial institutions, how can we apply these criteria both at the level of the fund manager or the financial institution as well as at the portfolio level. So fast forward, we ended 2020 with over 11.4 billion invested and mobilized, so more than 3 times what we thought originally was an ambitious target. And that really showed the investment opportunity, and especially in a crisis year like 2020, where everybody was afraid that there would be no pipeline in general. It was a very strong year for 2X, and really helped us build the evidence base based on our own data and our own investment experience. Going back to 2018, in parallel, Gender Smart had their first Gender Smart Investing Summit that I'm sure many of you remember as well. And that was the first time that there was an international convening bringing together leaders in gender finance across public and private markets, across emerging markets and developed markets, and really moving the needle on how we can build new alliances and collaboration to shift capital at scale. And so 2X and Gender Smart over these years have been closely collaborating. We've been spearheading toolkits together with practitioners, for example, at the nexus of gender and climate finance. We've been engaging at COP around gender and climate finance and that nexus. We've been building communities of practice of investment practitioners around, for example, climate, but also care economy and other crucial investment areas where we see opportunities and a strong investment and impact case. And then in 2021, we made the announcement of the 2X Collaborative as a global industry body for gender lens investing to bring this whole spectrum of capital providers together under a global umbrella and an industry association to move the needle further and to crowd in others. And we have since grown our membership from originally on the 2X side, the 20 DFIs and MDBs, to now more than 90 investment institutions. So we have Responsibility, we have Sagana, Big Liz, Alpha Mundi, many based out of Switzerland, but also other parts of the world. And it's amazing to see the traction and how we have, seen over just a few years, the wider field adopt the standards that we've started to set with the 2X criteria, but that have since evolved with other standard setting initiatives and harmonization efforts. And last year, we engaged with this diverse set of stakeholders around what does the next frontier of gender finance look like? How can we continue to unlock billions, but also how can we be even more intentional and solve for some of the more persistent gaps and market failures that we're still seeing, and unlock more opportunities. And in that vein, we announced 2X certification as the next chapter for us in our standard setting work. We've since engaged in a co-creation process to build on the current 2X investment criteria and the standard setting work to date, but to take it to the next level and develop a full-fledged certification mechanism together with the wider field to enhance the transparency, credibility, and assurance around gender finance. So as 2X Global, we have a number of strategic priorities that we've set for the next year. One is to continue to build investor capacity, because we've realized that, today I think everybody understands the why. Why does it matter? You mentioned it in your introduction. We all know that there's kind of, it's the right thing to do, right? So there's a moral imperative, but there's also a strong investment case and a business case and an impact case. But how do we go from there to actually changing our investment practices and really embedding gender as a value driver across the investment cycle and the business value chain? So that's our building capacity pillar. Then the second one is to align and advance standards. So how can we take our standard setting work to the next level and bring it more into mainstream standard setting initiatives and most notably advanced certification? And then the third one is to shift and shape markets, where we are collaborating with the panelists here on stage, but also others in the field to, for example, advance 2X Ignite, which is a market building facility for first-time female fund managers with gender lens investing strategies, and where we have other kind of bigger picture market building initiatives going on. And so my call to action at this International Women's Day is to invite you to join us at 2X Global and to join our membership and to engage in all of these initiatives, but also to really look at your core business and consider how you can go deeper and bolder and how you embed gender into everything you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for this very inspiring keynote. And hearing about all your initiatives, it sounds very promising. In particular, the certification initiative and the standards. I think it's much needed in the market for something concrete that is also tangible for people when they get a certification or certain standards that they can align to. But I'm sure we will speak about this a little bit later too. So I would like to continue our webinar with all our other panel speakers. And I would like to pose my first question to Raya from Sagana. Maybe you can embed your answer to my question also, sharing about what Sagana does, because not everybody is from the financial industry here on the call. So Raya, when most people think about applying a gender lens, they think of asset management or investing, but what does gender lens investing look like in a wealth management context for a private individual who would like to invest?
Thanks, Marta, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to be having this panel and this discussion on International Women's Day, but it is also relevant every day of the year. I'm Raya Papp. I'm co-founder of Sagana, where I lead basically our gender smart investing practice, as well as our healthcare investments. That's mostly in the private markets. And just to give you a context that Marta asked for, Sagana is an impact investing firm that works along the capital spectrum. So we work with high net worth individuals, family offices, and foundation endowments to invest their capital with impact. We also layer onto that a gender lens. And then also into some more working with more catalytic capital type allocators in terms of development finance institutions, development agencies, and some foundations. And so to your question of what is that, what does gender lens investing mean, and what have we done within our firm's investment process? We have integrated a gender lens into how we source deals, how we do diligence on deals, and how we do portfolio management and exits of deals. We do direct investments as well as fund investments. And we work not only with our team, but having done that at Sagana, we now work with other fund managers to integrate gender smart practices into their investment process and organization, as well as the organizations that they're investing in, so their portfolio companies or their counterparties, depending if they're debt or equity. I just wanted to kind of reflect beyond investing in women entrepreneurs or companies that are led by women. How do you expand beyond that and think about gender lens investing within the context of a company that you're investing in? And one of the key areas is products and services. So we work with financial institutions who are doing small and medium-sized enterprise, small business loans, loans to individuals. And initially, one of their reactions is we have to create a new product. But actually, and often creating a new product is expensive. But often in trying to understand your customer better, in this case, female customers or female small business owners, you can really actually shape or tweak existing products to meet their needs in a way that gives you a competitive advantage in the marketplace and helps grow your business. Another example of that would be, we had the pleasure of working with Responsability to integrate a gender lens into one of their funds, which was the Access to Clean Energy and Power Fund, which invests in renewable energy infrastructure in Africa and Asia. And I'm sure Martin will talk more about that. But along the lines of products and services, one of their key areas is commercial and industrial energy providers. And by working with the products and services of how they reach more women-led businesses, of having productive use capabilities and having these small businesses, they're able to expand the portfolio companies, or in their case, the counterparties business, bring in more revenues and reach more people with the access to energy. Another area is supply chains. So just to give an example there, we have worked with Circulate Capital, which is a waste management and recycling fund that invests in Asia. One of the more innovative companies there is called Recycle. And one of their key risks is the supply of plastic to recycle. They have created a supply chain where they have actually tailored their app for the aggregators that sell them the plastic to really orient towards women and engage them and provide them additional services around the app that locks in those women suppliers, which is one of the biggest components of whether or not a recycler is going to be successful or not. And then finally, as Jessica was talking about the areas within 2X certification or qualification, working with the organizations on, of course, their governance, their leadership, and integrating gender smart practices into their pay and promotion practices, really creating enabling environment for women, but honestly, not just for women, in the sense that creating an enabling environment is really good for everybody who's working at an organization, helps them thrive, helps the company be more successfully financially, and for the impact that they're trying to have. So Marta, just wanted to give you some specific examples that might make it more tangible of what we look at as individual investors that are working primarily with companies, or when we're working with funds who are also investing in companies.
Thank you very much for this very inspiring introduction, Raya. I already have some follow-up questions in mind, but let's move over to Audrey first, if you don't mind, from Robeco. Audrey, we are very keen to hear also your view. You have over 20 years of experience as a global portfolio manager for public listed equities. Why do you think is gender equality an investment goal?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because when I joined Robeco, I was very interested in getting on board with sustainable investing. And I'm a research person by trade, doing financial research. So I decided to do my own whether gender metrics predict company performance. And I can tell you without any doubt, in fact, we're soon going to be publishing a white paper that do predict things like profitability as measured by return on capital, or return on equity is typically higher when a company has more female managers. Higher operating profit margin is higher with more gender because it's a social and a moral reason, but we like it because it helps us to identify data available now that we can show that there is this link to predicting higher quality companies. And of course, Robeco, you probably know, we've been looking at gender lens investing as part of an overall sustainability probably for 20 years now. And the portfolio that I manage has nearly an 8-year track record investing in public companies. So it's not something that is new, but this is just new, very specific research to formalize the relationship between women in management and in quality companies.
Thank you very much, Audrey. It's really inspiring to also hear a female portfolio manager speaking about a female-centric topic on International Women's Day. So thank you very much for contributing. Moving on to Martin. The world will not change unless also men are involved. So equally, we need the men for this transition to happen. So thank you, Martin, for joining us today. From your perspective, Martin, moving into the private markets and impact investing, and also please embed it a little bit and introduce responsibility for the audience who is not from the financial industry. How do you measure and manage positive impact for gender equality is my first question. And then how responsibility apply the gender lens in its impact investing approaches?
Good. Yeah, thank you, Marta. Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you for inviting me to the panel and for the opportunity to speak to you. Yeah, so responsibility, we're an impact investor. We have a bit more than 5 billion in impact investing funds. Thematically, we're mostly addressing financial inclusion, sustainable food, and climate finance. And we do apply by now a gender lens quite consistently in the products that we have. But it's been a journey, and I'll use my 5 minutes here quickly to tell you a bit about this journey. You will see it really comes a bit from more passive reporting of data to more specific selection of investees, but then deeper assessment on gender points, then really more active engagement with investees, and finally all the way to technical assistance projects, so designing projects to actually support investees in that regard. And just to frame you a bit while you listen, I think there are two things that could be interesting in our journey for you as well. One is you will hear that on part of the improvements we did in this regard come from our investors, clearly externally induced, and part are really genuinely from responsibility from us, because we believe then applying the right lens in that case to our strategy. So that's one thing. And the second thing you'll hear is, as you probably know, in the end, this lens, the gender lens, what it highlights for us always are two different areas. One is more the internal to the investees, so their policies, the diversity we already heard about, and so what are they doing internally as a company? And the second area is always their work with their clients. So how do they say is opportunities? It's always these two angles. All right, so where do we come from? Our journey as a company overall, but then also on anything related to gender, starts with microfinance. We came from investing in microfinance institutions. In a way, that's a field that is somewhat easy, with a gender lens. And so you work with people, it's about access to finance. People have a gender. Institutions are recording that gender, so you can get that data. And so this is where we started. We reported on the impact side on look-through basis how many females are also reached indirectly by our activity. And we linked that then to SDG 5 over time. And at some point, we made this more explicit. Now also Article 9 is coming. So we had to put this down as one of the impact strategies, meaning now we actually look ex ante, what is the institution doing, how are they reaching out, and then ex post, how has that developed during the time we invested. So we improved there, but again, that's been a bit more easy. The next step we reached with a structured bond transaction 2019. That was also the initial phases of 2X, and we had DFC in the investor pool who asked us to comply with those criteria. So here we had I would probably say admittedly still low bar of criteria back then to reach. So look through majority of women in this financial inclusion portfolio that we put together, but it did influence portfolio composition. We needed a certain target, and interesting bit there was that we also work with SME lending institutions who very often do not have that data, gender of whether an SME is women-led or women-owned. So in our calculations, they always entered with 0. And so we had to shape the portfolio in a way that we worked more than with microfinance institutions that predominantly work with women. Next level was reached with a social bond that we did. And here again, externally induced, we had SIDA, Swedish Development Agency, with a guarantee, and they asked us to do a gender gap, a gender assessment of each institution's during due diligence, to engage on our findings with the institution. That was then more internal, so about policies, procedures, diversity, fair treatment or equal treatment in these institutions that we finance. It was financial institutions, it was agricultural companies, etc. It was actually also hospitals and other health companies that we financed. But it was engagement. Also from our side, we didn't have technical assistance to support them more actively. That changed with the fund that Raya has already mentioned, ACPF, Access to Clean Power. So this is in the climate finance space. So this finances solar power solutions at a retail and at an SME level. It's a 2X compliant fund again. 50% of the portfolio companies are actively improving and providing employment for women. And for that fund, we raised then some technical assistance money. So grant money with which we can sponsor activities to support the portfolio companies. So that's where we stand today. We're about to engage on 2 other funds, one in the area of sustainable food, one in the area of financial institutions, both of which will also have this element on technical assistance again, where we can send consultants to engage and work with portfolio companies. So that's of course a bit beyond gender smart investing. It's beyond selecting, it's beyond engaging, it's really actually making something more available. That's probably pretty unique to impact investing and the DFI world, to have access to these grants and go beyond and actually do something with your investees. So that's a brief summary of our experience here. So it's been a gradual process, and hope you could see a bit the different shapes also that we apply. And Marta, I'm mindful that I didn't really answer your first question, but maybe we just move that then into the discussion part.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Martin, for your introduction. So I can already see we already have questions posted on the right-hand side. And actually my first question, we're moving on now to the panel, is directed first to Raya. Raya, why is applying a gender lens interesting for private investors? And the question that I already see here in the chat is, what are the requirements of your company to support an innovative initiative by a woman? Maybe you can address those.
Happy to do that, Marta. And maybe I could ask Astrid just to put in an example of what she might mean by innovative initiative, so I can be more concrete there.
Okay.
Marta, to your question about why do private investors invest with a gender lens, there are different reasons for different investors. I would say the more traditional impact investors are looking for both commercial rates of return as well as impact. And thus for them, the kind of outsized returns that come with a diverse management team, diverse governance team, and basically a company that is aware of more than just a narrow focus. So they're aware of the benefits of diversity. They're aware of the opportunities by using customer segmentation to reach women through their products and services better. So that is maybe more a business performance or investment performance perspective. We certainly have investors, private investors, who are looking to create more opportunity, and they are looking for new sectors where there arguably has been underinvestment. So things like Jessica mentioned, the care economy. We have a lot of caregiving in the world that happens already and a lot more that needs to happen with aging populations. And so companies that are addressing care economy issues is a really interesting investment sector. Another one is women's health. And so there are both opportunities for financial returns as well as for impact on women and for society in general by investing in these kinds of companies.
Thank you very much, Raya. And once we have the additional information ready, we will go back to that question.
Great.
Jessica, I was wondering, you are speaking to a broad audience of people. When you speak about gender lens investing and you're meeting people for the first time who have not had touch points with it, what is the private reaction of those individuals who have never considered that, regardless of being it an institutional or private investor or organization? Can you maybe give us some insight here?
It's an excellent question, and I must say it really depends. There are a few, who are still asking about, like, what's the business case, what's the impact case, what's really the evidence base, and what they're most keen about understanding is kind of specifically in their business, where whether they're in private equity or in private debt or in listed equities, like what is the angle, what's the approach that they could take. And then also what's the evidence base, what's the practical experience of others. But I think even more interestingly, what I hear a lot is, kind of lived experience or something that they have experienced about that business or impact case. So I also hear a lot of anecdotal evidence or a lot of stories about what they have seen in their own career or in their own institutions or missed opportunities that they have identified. And what is really interesting is that what I hear quite frequently is, very successful businesses that have been able to scale and that originally had, for example, certain assumptions about the target market or, the ideal persona of a customer group. And then when they actually looked at their own business data, they started realizing that they had a significant male bias and that actually a much more attractive target market was the women's market. And then they kind of became gender smart or had started adopting a gender lens and serving the women's market more intentionally, but not because they originally thought that it was the right thing to do. It was more of a trial and error and then identifying an untapped market. So that for me are always, the really interesting insights. And sometimes you meet people on a panel and you think, wow, they've been gender equality champions all their life. But actually it started with this recognition that when they had a gender, blind business and then just through trial and error realized that there was an untapped market and that there was a business opportunity to unlock. And that was kind of the starting point for them to go on this journey.
Thank you very much.
Marta,
yes.
Can I answer that question too?
Of course, I was going to move over to you too now.
No, because I thought that I mean we have some experience with this as well, and I just wanted to share one point that I found interesting, and that is I think, you know, also admittedly my first reaction when GenderLens was then named as such, right, and applied or asked to be applied to our investment processes, my initial reaction was certainly also, oh, this is now additional burden again. We need specialist input for this. We need to gather yet more data. And I remember this was in the context of a climate fund. I said, guys, let us just do climate impact. I mean, that's what we're here for, and leave us alone with the gender angle. I learned a bit since then, and I think that's maybe interesting for people who are listening to this, because I mean, one thing I realized is that, of course, in the end, there is no gender neutral investing, right? I mean, if you don't apply a gender lens, or if you say it's a gender blind, Jessica says, pretty likely you will apply a certain personal lens or male lens, etc. So you have to anyways deal with this angle. No, that's one. And second, then, as our journey also showed, in the end, you have to see where the value for you and your business activity really is. And it opens up different opportunities, again, on the opportunity side, that you look at sectors, you look at client groups of your investees, et cetera, right? And on the other hand, I mean, we all have our diversity policies now, but we can also play a meaningful role in this regard in our investees. So I think we are a thematic investor, so we don't have a gender fund, but we are in every topic that we pursue, and then be it climate or be it financial inclusion, the gender aspect has to be mainstream. There's just no way around it.
And Martin, I think I remember when you and maybe some others very commonly have that reaction of, we're a climate fund, let us do our great work that we know how to do in climate, and how the journey that you explained is so important, because it's just starting somewhere, and it's starting with awareness, and then taking small steps and bigger steps along the way as it fits with what the organization can digest and integrate. And I think the other thing is that word integration is putting it in your existing investment processes, your existing conversations with management teams, so that it's not this onerous thing that sits on top, as unfortunately some of the reporting and regulation requirements have come to be in our investment world.
Thank you very much to both of you. And I really appreciate and encourage this discussion also amongst the panelists, although we are online. I would like to continue with Audrey, please. I was wondering, how can you identify a strong candidate company for a GenderLens investing portfolio? Audrey, can you please give us some insight?
Sure. And I have a post with some of the broad characteristics that we tend to be looking for. I mean, the way to simplify how to think about this is just how do you identify the strong company or candidate for GenderLens? And often we find that people focus just on the share of women on the board. But actually, if you look across all the developed market companies, there's now more women on the boards as a percent of the board than there are women in senior management. So we are a little bit concerned that all the regulatory environment has focused so much on the women on the board that we're not actually paying enough attention to retention, to other areas like moving up in a company, fostering an environment that aims to accelerate diverse representation across all levels of leadership. So when we're selecting a company, we're assessing it not just on that board score or board percent of females, but we're looking at actually 38 different criteria, because we want to make sure companies have policies to improve retention from the overall workforce, but all levels of talent, junior management, senior management, executive management. And we're also looking to focus on capturing how companies support that retention, whether it's, it doesn't even have to be gender representation. It could be for all diversity and inclusion. You want to have employee engagement, getting feedback all the time. You want to have transparent policy, whether it's on flexible work or family leave. All of these things can contribute to retention of females, but also retention of all of your diverse pool of candidates. So it boils down to having a lot of metrics and doing the bottom-up research that Robeco is very famous for at a company analysis level. We're just doing it with a slightly different lens on the gender side. I hope that answers the question. For the really categories, you can look in the chat.
Absolutely, thank you. Martin, would you like to chip in here and share with us how you guys identify a strong candidate?
Yeah, I mean, we come from a slightly different direction in the sense that our investment universe is not available, and we pick better or worse performers according to certain metrics, but rather we source private transactions, right? And we do then due diligence on them, and so that's why what you heard from me before, there is some selection possibility, of course, no, when you build a portfolio. And you can go according to then standards that may include gender dimensions. But I think in our case, the more direct interaction with companies is what you can use and leverage as an investor, no? Because you have to go for due diligence on the ground. You have to meet the management team. You have to read all the policies for your risk assessment anyways. No? And in that sense, you give feedback to companies, even on a debt transaction. If we enter into what we do on the private equity side, of course, yet another level, no, where you afterwards have the opportunity to be inside the organization and shape. That there's this additional leverage, no, that we can use in the direct interaction to at least give feedback. That's the easier step, and then the challenge is more that not all your ground staff is trained to be a gender expert in due diligence and giving feedback. So there, we have champions in the company that can then support this, etc. So you have to organize that. And then the next level, as I said, is more that if you have the availability to support through projects and grants, then you enter the phase of joint project design with the company, and then sending a consultant. So that's what we can do on our side.
Thank you very much, Martin. Before we move on to the Q&A part, I would like to pose a last question to the panel. If Jessica, you could please start. I was wondering if gender lens investing is such a compelling case, why are we having such a hard time implementing gender lens when investing?
Excellent question. I think, it kind of goes back to what we heard about. Do you make this an add-on, or do you make it part of your way of doing business? And where we've seen it, really play out, like when you have the business case and the impact case actually unfold and play out in practice, is when you make gender, like what I call, make it a value driver. So, rather than seeing it as an add-on or like a reporting exercise, to actually embed it in the value chain of the business, or as a fund manager, for example, in private equity and venture capital, embedded along the investment cycle and into your value creation plan, especially. And so, for example, looking at your own business and then saying, what are the opportunities along the business value chain? And you can use the 2X criteria as a starting point to say, okay, let's look at our ownership, let's look at leadership, let's look at employment, and then ultimately the supply chain and the customers and the target market and how we develop products and services. But similarly, as an investor, for example, in private equity and venture capital, saying, let's look at the way we source deals. Let's look at the way we do due diligence. What do we value? When we structure value creation plans, how can we have this not as a box ticking exercise, but actually identifying untapped opportunities, or what is the evidence base of how we can make the overall business more gender smart and really embed the gender lens into everything we do. And that way, instead of having it as this slightly strange add-on that feels like an extra burden, you actually look at it like you would look at any other business value driver, and you embed it into the way that you do things. And I think that also probably speaks to what Martin says. So, what we hear a lot is, I'm looking at so many SDGs and it's so much work, but instead of, looking at them in their boxes, how can you really leverage these synergies and look at the climate and gender nexus, for example? Or if you're in infrastructure, look at the evidence base of, what is the nexus between gender and those other impact goals that you care about, and how can you make this more synergetic? Because we all know that you can't reach some SDGs without a climate lens, and you certainly can't reach most SDGs without a gender lens, because in any case you will have an impact. The only question is, are you aware of it and using it to your advantage, or are you ignoring it and leaving impact and money on the table?
Thank you very much, Jessica. Audrey, could you chip in? What is your opinion? Why is it so hard implementing a gender lens?
Well, within public equities, it's been hard historically just because the data wasn't available. I mean, how do you compare one company to the other if they're not publishing % women at different levels of management? Do you know that there's only 18 companies in the whole world that have gender balance at all levels, board, executive managers, and workforce? There's only 18. So companies are reluctant to publish the data. Therefore, it's hard to determine which are the leaders to invest in. It's kind of a cycle, but I think that, we're all talking about it from a different lens, private equity, debt investing, but we are also have in 2022 launched an engagement process, and we're engaging with companies. And even early in the year, some companies are reluctant, even listed big companies are reluctant to talk about their metrics. But as more and more companies realize that there are going to be reporting requirements coming and more regulatory requirements, like the recent EU Commission law that came into effect in November that's going to encourage companies to have 30% women on the board. As the more government requirements come into play, companies are realizing they have to report these figures, and otherwise they won't be in any sustainable funds, whether it's a gender lens fund or an SDG portfolio or a sustainable global stars portfolio that I also co-manage at Robeco. So companies are becoming more aware. There will be more data available, and I think I also was participating in a Morningstar session which focuses on public companies, and they do think that in 2023, gender and diversity and equity inclusion will be a key theme for sustainable portfolios more than it has been in the past.
Thank you very much, Audrey. I'd like to move on to Raya, who just also posted something in the chat. But Raya, from your perspective for private clients in wealth management, why is it such a hard time implementing a gender lens?
I actually don't know that I think if anything, it's an awareness issue, that they're just not aware of the benefits of they're not aware of using a gender lens to do their investments, and then they're not aware of the benefits. But I do find once we are able to have a conversation with them, it just all clicks and falls into place. And so while they may not be leading with a gender lens, they are really happy to have that as something that's applied across all of their investments, whether they're climate investments or healthcare investments or synthetic biology investors. They recognize that this lens helps spot opportunities and identify risks that the companies may not otherwise see. And so it just makes their investments stronger and better performers. I think what's interesting, Audrey, to hear your comments about the public companies not wanting to share this data is we experience something, or I experience something different in the private markets. And granted, that is not with public reporting requirements. So those are conversations we can have one-to-one with management teams. I do find that many of them want to have diversity they don't know how to get there, and they don't know how to do it in the context of all the other things that they have to do to grow the business. And so being able to have those conversations and help guide them and take advantage of their openness and their intent, but maybe their lack of experience or expertise is a real opportunity for us, as well as, of course, for getting more capital to be invested through a gender lens.
Thank you very much, Raya. Before we move on to our Q&A section, Martin, would you like to add something to what has already been said?
No, just very briefly. I think this has been a good summary already of the reasons why. I think if you try to jump very high immediately with every topic, that's probably a bit difficult. And I think my story of you already invest a lot in getting, for example, climate impact or climate lens right in a certain product, and then you have to add something else. I think that is at the core of your question or the answer to it. And what I would just add is probably the solution lies somewhere in taking steps, right? And it's no wonder that we heard 3 times now from my panelist colleagues here, data, because that is maybe the easiest to start with. It when you build portfolios, when it's about investing, start with data that is available at different levels, and 2x criteria are starting point as well. And then you see what you learn from this, etc., and what you want to publish on this, or what you want to filter in your strategy, whatever the question is. I mean, that is probably a low level starting point. And then, even without inviting a senior high level expertise or redesigning your investment process, you may already spot certain things in your portfolios or in your approach. And then you can take it from there. That's what I would add.
Thank you very much, Martin. I would like to move on to our Q&A section of this webinar. So I'll start bottom up to have a look at the question. Okay, some have been I'm already answered. Olivier Clavet, I have a quick one. What is less obvious for organizations is to apply a gender lens compared to other sustainability goals that tend to get more visibility and greater action. Who would like to take this one? Is the question...
Okay, I could give it a try. Look, okay. It is generally accepted that... Can you hear me? Yes. It's generally accepted that if you invest in a highly profitable company, it's going to outperform. Or you invest in a company that has strong operating margin, it will outperform. But despite 20 years of data, it is not generally accepted that if you invest in a company with a high percentage of women, it tends to outperform. There is now a lot of data, and I see someone posted a paper. I'm not even familiar with that Oliver Wyman one, but McKinsey has done the research. Credit Suisse has done the research. They've shown that Morgan Stanley has also done some research on this, that more women in management are the types of will companies outperform. So I really can't answer exactly why, compared to other sustainability goals, it hasn't gotten as much visibility. I think it should get as much visibility, but historically it has not. But of course, we know there's 17 SDGs, and SDG 5 is just one of those 17, and a lot of them deal with more tangible things that you can measure, like environmental issues and whatnot. So maybe it's just a lack of measurement.
Maybe if I can add, Audrey, you talked well about the performance side, right? More on the financial performance, and maybe from the impact reporting side, I would say that it does actually get quite some attention. No, I mean, maybe little story from Responsibility's past. I mean, as I said, we always reported gender disaggregated data of our underlying investees in financial inclusion, because also it's not so difficult. But for many years, we had as 3 impact themes, impact strategies in the funds. We had financial inclusion of people, and nothing about gender there at that time. Then we had job creation, SME finance, and then we had financial sector building. Yeah. And a couple of years ago, we took that financial sector building out because for our investors, that was a bit at a meta level, not so clear. And what is this really as an impact strategy? Even though we still believe it's a good case, actually, but we did replace it with gender. Yeah. So I think that the trend's actually your friend, and SDG 5 gets streamlined across other SDGs then as well. You know, you look at access to clean water with a gender lens. No? So I think there is actually good demand for that data from investors, and there is increasingly supply and application by investment managers like us.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm looking at the Q&A section. Are there any additional questions from the audience? Please post them here. Okay. Yes, there is a question coming from Diana. This will be our last question before we close our webinar. So, okay, even more. Okay, so thank you for this wonderful session. I would like to hear more specific examples of due diligence processes adapted to unearth women-led investment ventures. Any innovation from the traditional ways of assessing a venture which is gender blind? Jessica, would you like to take this?
Yeah, happy to kick us off. So there's a lot of really good stuff here, and I think the most kind of fresh memory that I have is over the last months we engaged with women entrepreneurs directly, as well as with gender lens investors, especially fund managers, around developing principles for responsible exits in gender lens investing. But by asking the question about the exit, we ask obviously the question about the entry, and so it was really looking at the whole cycle. And it was so interesting. I talked to fund managers who reflected on how their pipeline changed when they changed their sourcing strategy. So they thought that, their sourcing approach was like equal opportunity, open to everybody, we know who's in the market. But the moment they stopped using the traditional channels of getting a prospective pipeline and actually opened up communications channels, for example, by looking at who was contacting them through LinkedIn or having other more open channels of receiving, pitch decks or referrals, they suddenly saw so much more diversity, so much more business opportunities of companies founded and led by women, but also of other, underprivileged groups or underrepresented groups, I should say. And we're incredibly amazed about the opportunity and how much pipeline there was. So I think that's one starting point, really reflecting on how you are receiving referrals or pitch decks or how you do your sourcing. And then the other really interesting aspect was, what are kind of the criteria that you're looking at, and is there inherent gender bias? And what are the kind of questions that you ask? How do you have clarity in evaluation? And there's some interesting experiments how your evaluation changes depending on whether you have clarity around what you're looking for before you go into the evaluation, or if you start making kind of judgment calls along the way. And there's a really interesting research by Village Capital, IFC, and others that I think is just coming out at around this time. So it's brand new, that really shows the inherent bias that's unconscious and how you can overcome some of these challenges and look at your prospects in a different way.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for your answer. I'm being mindful of our time, and I'm sure all those questions that we still have open, some of them have been now replied already in writing by our panelists, and if there are still some open, you may address those directly to them by email. I would like to still hand over for an GLS announcement to Tim. It's a really exciting thing that he will be announcing. So Tim Raji, over to you. We don't hear you. Or at least I don't hear you. Okay, my co-panelists also don't hear you. No.
What about now?
Yes, we hear you now. We just don't see you.
Okay, super. Can you see me as well?
No, we don't see you. We just hear you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. So the Gender Lens Initiative for Switzerland is a program hosted by Sustainable Finance Geneva. Today is its second anniversary. And in the first 2 years, we worked on generating a lot of market data in partnership with institutions like 2X and Tameo and Swiss Sustainable Finance. We decided that once we had created this awareness in the Swiss financial industry about the relevance of a gender lens considerations and its advantages from a bottom line perspective, the rubber should hit the road, and we should enable financial institutions in Switzerland to start taking stock of where they stand from a SDG 5 and gender lens perspective. What are the gaps to where they want to be, and how to address those gaps. And in Switzerland, we do have partners such as the EDGE Foundation that allow institutions to get to more diversity in a staged and systematic fashion. But the first step is to open, as Jessica was mentioning, a channel of communication. And so the GLIS is inviting all those who work in the Swiss financial industry to consider becoming ambassadors for this topic. And so we are looking for at least one ambassador in each of the financial institutions in Switzerland. We're launching a pilot program. We would like to have at least 5 ambassadors this year, but it could go up to 10 or 15 if there's interest. We would train the trainers. So we would train the ambassadors, and then they would train their leadership, train their staff, train their clients, and hopefully help their institution become more gender diverse, empower women, whether they be staff, clients, or in the portfolios as entrepreneurs. So it's a very exciting project. It's a very innovative one for the Swiss financial industry. And we invite you to look at our LinkedIn page for the GLIS, or at the webpage of the GLIS on Sustainable Finance Geneva to find the information about this ambassadors program and send us your application. We look forward to meeting you and working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim, for this interesting announcement, and I'm sure there will be a lot of interest coming from the audience. We have come to the end. I would like to thank all the panelists here online who have participated and contributed, really shared with us excellent insights. I would also like to thank all the audience that has joined us from Switzerland and abroad. I think it's clear, gender lens investing is not only an investment case, but to quote Jessica, a business, impact, and a moral case. That's a beautiful ending for me. Thank you for inspiring me. And as we also heard from Audrey, there are only 18 gender balanced companies in the world. So let's put let's cramp our shirts up and do something about it in order to reach the United Nations sustainability goals. Thank you very much, everybody, and happy International Women's Day. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marta.
everyone.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.